Hey everybody, it's Ashley again. So my bowl that I made in a previous video is dry and ready, or drier, and ready to get trimmed. This one, the rim got way more dry than I anticipated while I was picking up kiddos from school. But it's okay because the part that I need to work on is still perfectly fine to trim. So take it off our wheel and gently flip it over. There was a little bit of clay still stuck in this middle part where the bottom had been, so I used my little scraper to just kind of get most of that off. It doesn't have to be perfectly clean. I typically will leave it kind of like this because it helps me see where I need to place it to trim the bottom. So what we're trimming is going to be this kind of edge back here, and we're going to smooth that off and kind of curve it into the bottom of the bowl. So the thickness down here in this area is about like this right now. So we've got quite a bit of space to work with as far as trimming, so that the inside of the bowl shape matches the outside of the bowl shape. You don't want to get the clay too thick in one area because it can cause cracking if you do that. So it's going to be a little harder to center because I have this little lip that sticks out on this side, but I think this is pretty close. I'm going to turn my wheel on slow and turn that fan off so I get a little less background noise. And you can see just how much it kind of wobbles to one side. So slide and play with just a little bit here because I want the center of the bottom to be in the center of the wheel. All right. That's about as close as I'm going to be able to get it since this little part over here sticks out. I'm going to grab some of my extra clay. And this is just clay from trimming other bowls that I have thrown in a bag to keep it damp. And it has turned into a mix of a couple of different kinds of clay. So at this point, I wouldn't make anything out of this to fire it with. So the best thing I can do to not just waste it is use it for things like this. So I'm going to place 3 blobs around this bowl, and I'm sticking it to the wheel and not to the bowl, because they're going to hold this bowl in place while I'm trimming it. You don't want to press it into your bowl because it can damage or change that circle shape of that rim. There are a lot of different kinds of tools for trimming. I'll show you a couple of the ones I use most often. So you've got your needle tool. This one is a little bit nicer than most of the ones that I see. Most of them have just a straight metal handle. This one has, when it's not covered in clay. It has a wider wooden handle that's covered by this kind of rubber sealant to keep it in better shape for longer. But I do use this quite a bit. Then we have another trimming tool. So some of the loop tools, there are different sizes, different shapes, and in some of them, how wide this part is will be different. They can all be used for all kinds of different purposes, and it's kind of one of those figure out what works best for what you want to do with it situations. So this end does have a curved kind of side to it. This one is more squared off, but I use this one a lot for trimming the inside of the bottom, inside that foot area. This guy has most recently become one of my favorites. It's a lot thinner. It's more like a wire instead of this kind of thicker version. You can see the difference in the thickness of those there. And then, you know, even wider, you've got this guy. I'll talk about him in a second. Then again, you've got the different shape of the different ends. And again, it's just how you use it, how things work best for you as to how you want to use them. This one again has a nice sturdy wooden handle on it. Some of the ones that I have seen, especially some of the ones that you'll get in the kits, feel a little more, I don't want to say janky, but you can definitely tell when you get some of the more expensive ones that they just feel more sturdy. This tool is often used for trimming, especially if you've got a lot to trim. This guy will take off a lot of material quicker than something that is smaller and thinner. So if you've got a really thick bottom, or you've got a lot of extra clay on this outer area that you need to take off because you didn't make the sidewall thin enough to begin with, you want something more like this. So to start with, I'm going to use this guy to kind of smooth down this very outside edge, and then I'll use one of these other ones to kind of refine that shape a little bit better, where you've got less coming off at once and a little more control over it. So again, I'm going to go the slowest speed that this wheel will do, and you got to be careful, because if you're not careful and you're distracted, these tools can very easily grab into the clay as it spins, and it will sometimes just jerk a big chunk out. Sometimes it will pull the whole bowl out from your little clay footings that are holding it down, and it'll throw it, because it's spinning, off onto your table that you're trimming on, or into your pan where you've been working. Sometimes you can save it, sometimes not as much. I typically put my hand on the top here as just kind of a fail-safe, so that if it does grab and try to throw the bowl, I can have a little bit more control over how far it goes. Instead of getting thrown completely off onto the ground. You want to try to keep your tool at the same depth as you're trimming, so that you don't end up with, you know, a bowl that's going like wavy on the bottom. And sometimes if your bottom has gotten too dry, it will try to force your tool to bounce on the surface instead of just letting the tool kind of cut through it. I've got a little bit of that here. And some of those other tools that I have will kind of help smooth those down as I go. Stop this for a second. You can see with the shadow how I've got some of these wavy bumps in here. So that was because this was starting to get to the point where it was almost too dry, and I need to use a different tool that will allow me to kind of get rid of those bumps as I make more smaller changes to how deep the bottom of this bowl is. We'll start off with this one. See if I can get that any slower. So you can already see that most of those bumps are pretty much gone at this point. So it's just, there's still a few that I can see, but using a different tool that'll take less clay off at a time can help get rid of some of those bumpy areas. Also, with this tool in particular, each end also has two sides. So the side that I've been using is the smooth side, but it also has a side where there are little teeth cut into it, and it provides like this little texture line. I'll turn the wheel off in just 1 second so you can kind of see some of those lines a little better. I know as it's spinning in the video, it's hard to see the lines. So we'll get a little closer for a second, if I can get this out. So you can see the kind of texture lines that that tool gives. And the other end has the same texture lines in it as well. So it depends on, you know, if you like that kind of texture, if you want that texture, or if you want it to be smooth. A lot of people kind of assume that it needs to be smooth, but it really doesn't. It's a personal preference as to how you want it to look or feel. And I've got a couple friends that touching smooth clay weirds them out. But when I carve stuff into it and the whole thing kind of has texture, they seem to be all right with how it feels. Just something about that super smooth clay that's not nice. And when I was teaching, I did have students that wanted to wear gloves while working with clay because it was just a sensory thing that they were not comfortable with. And if you've always thought that you couldn't do pottery or work with clay because you had the same problem, you can get gloves, just like doctor's office gloves, As long as they're not like the super loose ones like they use in the school cafeteria. I typically get some that are tight. So my hands are too big for the small ones, but I get the medium size and they just fit. There's not any loose areas. So I can use those while I am throwing. I typically don't though, because it doesn't bother me. Every now and then I will, if I get a cut on my finger and I don't want to get clay or clay water in my cut, I will use them when I have that going on. I'll show you this other side too. It's a very similar trim. So this is the smooth side. Just takes a little off that outside edge. But it also has the same like teeth that create that texture. Like I said, if that's something you like. Turn that off for 1 second. I'll pop one of these little feet off. I might have to take this one off too. Alright, so on this edge where it's too dry, I did have a little bit crack as I was trimming here. And that's going to be okay because I'm actually going to rehydrate this and then trim it so that it has like a decorative edge to it. So that's not a big deal. But see my outside, like in this area where my finger is, between that and my thumb. We've still got about that much clay. Doesn't look like it would be that much. There's still quite a bit there. So more trimming. So pop these back down. And again, I'm sticking it to the wheel, not to the bowl. tool can smooth down the very top of this where I want the foot of this bowl to go. This square-ended tool. Just follow a little inside of that flat area. When you trim a foot like this, it takes some of the weight of the clay out of the bottom. So the more clay that's making up your bowl, the heavier it's going to be. Now I'm just kind of trimming down the outside of this foot. Don't make this foot too terribly deep. Just enough so there is a difference between the side and that foot there. And there are different ways to do feet on the bottom of a bowl. You could just have it be continuously smooth all the way across. Just making sure that you have a large enough flat area for your bowl or your vase, your cup, not to just roll over on its side. Right now I'm just using a little bit of water on the tip of my finger to smooth out any visible lines from the trimming. Sometimes I like having the lines on the bottom, sometimes I don't. It just depends. And then I'll show you one last tool before I set this off for today. I'm not sure what these guys are called. It's kind of like a rubber rib. And again, most of the tools can be used in lots of different ways. I use this one to kind of smooth out this surface. So any tool marks that are left from trimming will get smoothed down. Especially like on the rim where I haven't trimmed anything. I'll come back and use this to get rid of any like finger swaths or sponge marks that are still there from that. So using this kind of tool will give this almost that like mirror-like finish while it's still a little bit wet, but it'll be super, super smooth. Feet, and those I will dip in my water bucket before I put them back in the bag so they stay nice and wet and ready to use the next time I need them for trimming a bowl. For now, I'm gonna put this guy on my little cutting board. I found a bunch of these at the dollar store a long time ago. I don't know if they still have them, but these are fantastic for using stuff like this. I need to trim the inside of that foot a little bit better. Might be hard to see in the video, but you can kind of see the texture right here in the center from the cutting board, and we need to see more of that on the rim of the foot, not here in the middle. So I'm gonna address that when I come back to work on the rim. But for right now, I'm gonna take a couple of paper towels, and you can reuse paper towels over and over. Some people use a rag. Just depends on personal preference. I dipped it in my water. I'm wring most of the water out so that it's damp. I don't want it to be like super sloppy. I'm just gonna take and wrap that and make sure that rim is covered. We'll put this inside the grocery bag. Super high tech. Took all that open part underneath and set it on the shelf so that that water from that paper towel can kind of soak back in, and then I'll be able to work with that rim a little bit. There will be another video where I will show you guys the glazing process and then how it ended up turning out after that. So make sure you keep an eye out for the bowl numbers, because that will kind of show you where things are as far as start to trimming to glazing to finished. So I hope I see you guys back again, and I'll let you know how this turns out.